depending on how far down you get it, obviously. But once you get that down to 50% or lower, you'll be able to start the final mission, which is to assault the government facilities. And if you manage to take over the facilities, in other words, complete the mission, then you will have successfully annexed the planet. All this stuff will happen within a third-person, first-person shooter kind of gameplay experience. You will have the ability to have AI units with you. There will be some skills you can train to like make the battle more of a commandy kind of thing, where you give commands to your soldiers and they'll go do them, or you can just fight alongside them, have the AI control them wholesale, and then just fight through the mission Call of Duty style or something. Speaking of which, while I'm doing this, I want to let's see. For some reason my Black Ops 3 install corrupts itself anytime I play it, so I have to validate it pretty much every time I start it up after I finish playing it after a while. So it'll be maybe more Call of Duty style in that instance, where you just have the AI that are doing their thing and you're doing your thing. You'll be able to train skills to make the AI stronger or better, a little better tactically, maybe make it so that they use cover more efficiently or have better assault tactics. I think that'd be a little interesting kind of thing to work with, to where, as you increase a certain set of skills, your AI fighters would become more, more soldiery-like. I don't know how to explain it. They do things more efficiently and better than they would otherwise. It would be kind of interesting to see how that works. And there's the I word again. You're gonna hear it a lot more times. Trust me. The 8-letter I word or something. I don't know how many letters interesting is. And you should start saying fascinating. So that's it for planetary battle. So let's talk about the free range mode, I guess we'll call it, because I have no clue what to freaking call it other than that. So this is more of the mode where it's more kind of open world, where you're just out in the environment and things can happen. Whether they're in direct response to what you're doing at the time or something you've done in the past. So for example, let's say you're on a station going to buy some equipment, and let's say that you've made some company really mad at you, and so they've hired a hitman to come in and try and kill you. And so you may or may not realize it, but you might be being tailed by an assassin, and there's a chance that he can kill you. Or if you notice there's somebody following you, it won't be like, Uber hitman kind of thing where, if you don't notice somebody just following you randomly, they're going to, kill you and you won't even be able to do anything about it. There will be a chance they can do that, but it'll be pretty slim. Because it'll essentially be like, the NPCs around that assassin would do something that would indicate to you that there's something wrong. Like, for example, yell, he's got a gun, or, be like a whole hubbub about people running away from somebody. Or, guy would take a shot at you and miss because people bump into him, whatever. Or the other scenario where he manages to get a clean shot off and kills you. That's also, that by necessity has to be an option that can happen. Though it may not. I'm going to try and see if I can make it so it doesn't always happen, because that'd be pretty freaking annoying. Oh, I'm just going to get myself a new ship. Boom. And get your head blown all over the station wall or something. It's like that, Pip Boy guy from Fallout, just walking down, gets blasted away. So that's what I mean by that. So not only with assassins, just in general. So for example, let's say that you're maybe not a wanted criminal, but you are a known criminal that's on the radar for certain agencies within the government. You're on a station, some Teleroth guy notices you, and then they're chasing you. So depending on what you do during that chase, there might be different levels of lethal force or non-lethal force used against you. For example, they might just try and capture you if you're just running away from them. Obviously, it depends on your crimes. But if you start, firing at them or, posing, a risk to civilians or using them as like shields or something, then that's when they're going to start using lethal force on you. Obviously, if you have murdered a couple of people, they're going to probably go to right for lethal force at the beginning, but there will be the chance that they don't. You can also get in trouble for doing things on the station at the time. So let's say that you are hacking a banking terminal or something, and security notices you, so you end up in that kind of a situation. I also want to try and make it so that there's a little bit of a parkour kind of feel to it. When you're running away from individuals, have it so that you can jump over things and kind of free run it a little bit, kind of Mirror's Edge style, but not really fully like that, but just make it so that there's things you can do to get away from a situation without having to actually fight, rather than just having you run and try and jump over things all just kind of hovering style, or getting caught on things and all the kind of retro kind of stealth game BS that you've probably seen before or run into before. I really want to have this kind of where you're just out of your ship walking in places be really unpredictable in a way that anything could really happen depending on what you've done to people in the past or what you're doing currently. And that also applies to when you're exploring derelict ships and stations and things, or if you're infiltrating a ship, an enemy ship or station. For example, when you're exploring uncharted space, unmapped space, you'll be able to find derelict stations and things, and you could board them to either try and rehabilitate them and take them over, or to completely dismantle them and take the resources from the ship, or just to find if there's anything on board worth looting. And during that situation, you can run into pirates, you can run into other, shall we say, treasure hunters, and things like that that would put you in a combat situation where you'd have to fight it out with whoever's there, if combat indeed does break out. Or if you're infiltrating a Teleroth station or an enemy ship or something. Sorry, for whatever reason. Either to try and take the ship over, to sabotage it, to kill a specific person, maybe a target. Just whatever the reason you might be on a ship or a station. And that situation, different things will happen depending on the situation as it evolves. Like, for example, if you run into like a checkpoint or some sort of situation where there's some kind of passphrase or code or whatever that you have to use to get by the particular area without being, to kind of validate that you're an actual crew member, and you get it wrong, there should be the potential that you end up getting into a fight because of that, or captured even. But there will also be ways that you can get that information too, so it's not like you won't be able to ever have that information. It's just that it'll be an additional thing you'll have to do before boarding that station or that ship. Depending on the situation, of course, you won't always run into that kind of stuff. Mainly, you'd see it on the stations most of the time, especially Teleroth stations. But on ships, maybe not so much. So it's going to be one of the more flexible and fluidic systems, combat systems in the game, really. So let's talk about now fleet-based battle. So if you've ever played gratuitous space battles, it's going to be a lot like that, where you have a fleet that you have that you can assign, a fleet of ships you have to assign formations to. You can choose whether they stay in that formation or whether they can have some sort of range of free movement. You won't be able to directly control the ships, but you'll be able to give them, orders and certain rules that they'll follow based on what's going on in the battle. So, for example, say you have a repair ship, you can give it the order to stay back behind the front line, unless or until maybe a capital ship has a certain level of damage. Then it will go forward and repair that ship. So that kind of a situation. Unlike GSP, though, you will have the ability to call in reinforcements if you have them, and to be able to alter the area of operations for any given particular portion of the fleet. So let's say, for example, that you set up a portion of your fleet to attack the northern portion of the map. You can then take those ships and say, well, I want you to start operating in the central area of the map. Like, let's say the enemies in the northern part of the map are being destroyed. You have to reassign that particular group of ships in the fleet to the central or the southern portions or wherever the enemies are at. And they'll go fight them there. Or you can use that tactically and say, well, these ships up there are, really just kick butt, took names, no chewing gum, whatever. And they're not really that damaged. And the ships that are there for the enemy are really damaged, going to be easy to destroy. So I'll send my ships from the central section, which are a little bit more beat up there, bring the upper sections down to the middle, and have them take out what's left of the central section enemy ships, and have the previous central section take out the remnants of the stuff up top. And that will be possible to do. You won't be able to direct individual ships to individual points, so it'll be a grouping of ships you've created during the fleet creating process. You'll have the ability to kind of section off the fleet into different subfleets, and you'll be able to use those subfleets to then reshuffle or change the battlefield in ways that are beneficial to you. And also call on reinforcements to reinforce those subfleets. You won't be able to build ships during fleet-based battle. This will be based on the ships that you have available to you at the time. You'll be able to also build ships, though, before you start the fleet-based battle. So it'll be kind of similar to GSP, where you'll have a screen where you can select fleets, but you can also create fleets for a certain amount of resources, and be able to use them then, or put them in reserve to bring them in later on. So also, like in GSP, you'll be able to take enemy ships after the battle, depending on how damaged they are. And you won't have to actually destroy every ship in an enemy fleet to win. It'll just have to be enough that the AI has no realistic chance of catching up to you, especially if they don't have any reinforcements to use. On the other hand, though, if you're getting beat pretty badly, you'll have the choice, no matter how badly you're being beaten, whether to surrender or not. And at certain points, it'll prompt you if you want to surrender or not. So, like, for example, at 15% of your fleet effectiveness against the enemy fleet, it'll ask you if you want to surrender, and if not, then you'll continue. Then again, at 10%, then at 5%. 5% or lower, after 5%, it won't ask you again. You'll just get, destroyed, basically. And that also is going to be similar to GSP, where the types of ships and the number of ships you have will be compared against the enemy fleet. And you'll have kind of a comparative fleet power value. It won't be based on the HP of your fleet like in GSP. It'll be more related to the threat system kind of thing, where it'll measure the different the total damage output of the fleets versus the defenses of all the ships in the fleet and how much damage the fleet as a whole can withstand. So, for example, this could be exploitable. For example, say you bring in some ships that have really hard shields. That's going to disproportionately affect how the enemy fleet's being compared to yours, because their damage won't do as much damage to you. On the other hand, the AI can do the same thing. So it's not an unfair advantage. It's just whether or not you're taking advantage of it. So in that situation, let's say you're the ones with the ships with the really hard shields. And let's say you have maybe half the size of the fleet that the enemy does, but you can still win because the strength of that fleet compared to yours is going to be lower, because their damage output that will affect your fleet is going to be less than yours that would affect theirs. Now again, it's not going to be a huge difference because you don't want to start off with an unfair advantage, but it will be, as time goes on throughout the battle, it'll be a greater and greater impact, because they'll start losing you, or they will start losing their frontline ships and their damaged ships, and they'll just have these really hard shield ships left, and on both sides they'll be losing those ships, and you won't be able to do as much damage. So those ships that have hard shielding will become more and more valuable as the battle wears on. Which is why it is a good tactical decision to take those ships out first, even if you have more deadly ships that are dealing a lot of damage to you. Because if you go through, defeat all the other ships, and you're only left with a few ships of your own for attacking, and you got maybe 2 or 3 of these really hardened ships, the chances are that your effectiveness against that fleet, the fleet effectiveness value of your fleet, is going to be pretty low, because those shields are going to neutralize a lot of your damage that you can do. Again, a way to get around that is to also use ships that can take shields out. So using EMP weaponry, for example, will be able to allow you to take those shields down faster, and that will decrease the effectiveness of the enemy's fleet and bring it more into an even match, or even more into your favor. So the effectiveness of your fleet against the enemy fleet, or vice versa, depends on the real time at that time amount of damage that your fleet can sustain from their fleet, or their fleet can sustain from your fleet, based on all the metrics for the ships within those fleets. It's going to be a really more involved system than GSB's was, really, to be honest. A little more complicated, a little more tactically complex. And GSB was, there were some tactics to it because of the way, the types of ships you used. Generally, though, if you just kind of spammed fighters, enough of them, you could pretty much take out a lot of most fleets, but you wouldn't really be able to do that with the system as I'm envisioning it for Odyssian Void, because no matter what level of fighters you have, they're not going to have very much health. You could have friggin' clouds and swarms of them, like thousands of them or something, but that's only going to equal maybe one capital ship in terms of HP. But that doesn't really matter because it's based on damage output. So if these ships all do like 2 or 3 damage to a capital ship, worth of damage, and the capital ship has, say, shield values of like thousands, tens of thousands, those clouds of frigates, fighters, unless they have some kind of EMP weaponry, are not going to be very effective against those ships. Now that is also true in GSB, but it's also true that if you have enough of them, you can actually pierce the shielding enough to make a difference. It's just going to be really kind of a balancing act. It's going to require a lot of tweaking and balancing and things like that, but in general it's going to be set up so that you have to play tactically with weaponry and ships, just like with RTS style battles, in order to effectively win some missions. So we've covered ship-to-ship battle. Well, no, it's next. Ship-to-ship's next. Well, half of the ship-to-ship is next. We've already covered the RTS, ARTS. We have to cover first and third person for the ship-to-ship battle. So we covered the FPS. We covered the kind of the free roaming one we covered, RTS we covered just now, fleet based, and yeah, it's all that's left is the ship to ship battle for third and third person. Third combination, yeah, third person battle system. First and third. Sound like friggin' Forrest Gump. Bird. So literally when I say third and first person, I literally mean what that sounds like. So you're either going to have the camera be in the cockpit looking out, kind of Elite Dangerous style, or you're going to have the camera be outside of the ship and you be controlling the ship through mouse clicking, like in EVE Online. And the reason I want to do that kind of a dichotomy is because there's sometimes when I hate that, in the cockpit kind of system, because it can get freaking annoying after a while, especially during more difficult fighting, like you're fighting against more difficult ships that are faster than yours, or dealing with weapon systems that have like specific ways of attacking, because you have to orient yourself with the enemy ships in certain ways, and if those ships are faster than you, it can be really hard to do anything with it. I actually ended up in a dogfight. I have Elite Dangerous. I was in a dogfight with an enemy ship during the training for about 35 minutes because I couldn't get the frigging thing to stay within my attack lanes long enough to do any real damage to it. Just because of the mechanics of how flight works in the game. It's really made for kind of a jousting style of battle where you're flying directly at, or are able to, for some reason, without the AI doing anything stupid, fly directly behind the AI, which normally won't happen. The AI is pretty good about not allowing you to do that. But at the same time, because of that, you spend most of your time trying to frigging find the enemy ship, which is, you're essentially flying around each other, if you will. And that just gets old pretty fast for me sometimes. So that's why the two different modes, and they'll be able to switch between the two modes at will. Same thing with first-person styles, either free range or the FPS, battle modes. You'll be able to switch between third-person and first-person as you want to. Well, maybe not. I don't know. I'll have to decide, because if I do that, there's going to have to be a different user interface for third-person and first-person. It makes no sense to be in third-person mode and have a first-person UI showing up around the screen, because that's just stupid. No offense to BioWare. It makes sense for that in some weird way. I don't know how, but it just would seem strange to me. I guess it doesn't seem strange for BioWare because that's how all their games have been. But I want the user interfaces to make sense in at least some fundamental levels. So, for example, for the camera outside of the ship, that makes sense because let's say that camera connects to a video feed within the cockpit, and essentially you're kind of looking into maybe like a 3D virtual reality kind of thing where you're being immersed in that camera feed and the UI is being displayed around that. You can't do the same thing with the first-person shooter, because you'd be saying, okay, well, I have this camera following me and I'm running through a hallway with this giant visor on my head, and I have this gun and I'm firing at people that are right in front of me that I could probably see a line of sight pretty easily, and there's no real, nothing in the way that's going to keep me from seeing these guys, because, I can look around freely, but I just want to use this camera thing because, one, the camera can be destroyed pretty easily, and two, because this visor thing on my head is going to help me fight better, because it's going to not affect my balance and center of gravity and all that kinds of good stuff. Yeah, it doesn't make much sense, does it? So that's going to be something that would need to be different. Maybe something similar to how they do it in Dark Space, where there's actually like some sort of visual cues on the armor or on the weapon or something as to like how much ammo's left or what have you. That's also true though for the camera outside the ship perspective. If the enemy destroys that camera that you have out there, it won't be won't be easy to do because the camera's not going to be targetable. It'll be kind of be something like it'll be destroyed by collateral damage almost, or by an errant lucky shot or something. And that would kind of maybe disable that system for a while and be forced to fight from the cockpit. That would be an interesting mechanic to use. Let me write that down. Now that I think about it. Destroyable camera in S2S battle that disables TPS mode for a time. So, but yeah, so, in the, cockpit style mode of flight, ship flight, you'll, control the ship through controller, mouse, keyboard, joystick, whatever. And, essentially have control over the axes and, strafing and, all that kind of good stuff. Whereas with the camera outside of the ship perspective, third-person perspective, you'll control the ship through right-clicking on objects, targets to then choosing, like, even line of style where you right-click on it and say orbit at some distance or follow at this distance or what have you. Or just choose a point in space and fly towards it or something, or I should say really a direction, not a point. So, there will be different battle movement kind of things, styles going on that you can choose from. Other than that, really, I think that's pretty much everything for the battle system. It's a pretty lengthy video here, but it was supposed to be. So hopefully you have a better kind of idea of what kinds of ideas I have for the different battle modes, and also the kinds of situations that maybe you might be facing within them. And maybe hopefully gives you a better idea of what the gameplay would kind of be like. So thanks for watching. If you have any comments, questions, leave them below. If you haven't done so already, would appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. And I will see you in the next series of videos.